for a mixed mental arts chat about Congress, part 2. It's going to be a little light today. I believe we might have other people joining as the show rolls on. But for now, it is just I, Dustin Cubit, Dusty Cubes, aka the woke centrist. And I got my buddy here, Mr. Gooley. Go ahead and
Hi.
introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Isaiah. I am a person in
All right.
America.
The human known as Isaiah brought this topic for us to chew over today, and it is Congress. I know we discussed it quite recently but I think there was one point where it did get a little off the rails, but we have since resolved that issue. But what it seems to me today, Isaiah, is that people pay too little attention to Congress and too much attention to the presidency. I think it's what could we do to show how important keeping an eye on Congress is?
Well, the first thing that people can do is read the Constitution of the U.S., which you would think that would be requisite reading in schools across the United States, but for some reason it doesn't seem to be.
Well, I don't know if it wasn't because I remember having to read it um, in elementary school. I remember it at least.
Yeah.
But at that point, reading comprehension or particularly attention to the subjects wasn't really there for me at that point. I don't know if it was for others, but yeah, that wasn't. I know we did have a little bit of civics in high school, but we didn't really go over the Constitution.
Well, yeah. I mean, we talk about the American government and how it works, how to vote, how to register, et cetera, but very rarely do we talk about what government does, how it functions, and what it's made up of. I mean, people talk about the bicameral legislature in schools, and the checks and balances that are there in the government, but like the nitty gritty of like the history of how laws get passed, or you know the importance of elections for Congress, or contemporary problems within congressional processes. Those are like graduate level courses oftentimes.
Well, certainly. And then just reading books about specific issues, like to name one, Republic Lost, who was written by Mr.
Lawrence Lessig.
Yeah, the name just escaped me then. I don't know why, since I quote him so much and refer to his work so much. Must be I forgot to take my Alpha Brain, but and my coffee as well. But there's a lot of heavy duty scholarly work in that book towards the end of it about constitutional law, how difficult it is to pass things, and how much that how much checks and balances plays into how fearful people are. And I just don't like now that I'm understanding how this stuff works more and more as I age, the ratcheting of fears seems kind of ridiculous considering how hard it is to change something in relation to the Constitution.
Well, yeah, if you look at the last constitutional amendment that was passed, it was like in the 1980s. And it was to set how Congress can give itself raises.
Yeah, and the one of the main things about the constitutional amendments as well is it's all about having state majorities. So, what was it, 37 or 38 states that need to ratify an
You have to have
amendment?
three quarters of the states ratify an amendment.
Yeah, so it's not like, oh, we're gonna take your freedoms away, we're gonna take your guns away. That's not something that is easily done, or at least constitutionally easily done. There's
Yeah.
so many checks and balances in place that afford these freedoms to everybody. People just, I don't know, I guess they just don't have an understanding of government such that overnight the government can just take your guns away or restrict your freedom of speech or any number of constitutional rights. It seems some are actually getting eroded, such, like the Fourth Amendment
Yeah.
is a
Fourth and
big one.
14th are the ones that are the easiest ones to attack through law. And those are like the majority of Supreme Court cases that come up are the laws concerning the Fourth and 14th Amendment, such as um I think that the travel ban would fall under the Fourth Amendment, honestly. Um Being that people are supposed to be securing their persons. And also the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, which was established within Justice Sotomayor's dissent on that specific case. But like even with something like the travel ban, that was a executive order that should have never been empowered through the president to make, because it's like a flouting of the legislative process. And the Supreme Court in a split decision decided to say, hey, this is something the president can do, when it in actuality should be something that the Congress should do, is establish, you know, Immigration and Nationality Act. And like they upheld they upheld Trump's travel ban based on a law that was passed by Congress in 1965. So what have we learned in this endeavor? That Congress has ceded a lot of its power to the executive branch over the past 50 years, I think.
Well, it's often an absence of responsibility. So you have, well, if you look at the most recent example, um, Trump said, well, when you guys pass a law, we'll get it fixed. Um, and then what happened was Trump made an executive order
Yeah.
relieving Congress, well, partially relieving Congress of the duty to fix the situation.
Yep.
But yeah, I think there's also too much power, or like people look to the president to solve these issues. The president is right in inferring with Congress. I know it's probably more a political tactic than anything, shifting the blame, but there has been many instances where one, because they did not want to do something, would shift the blame to Congress. So even though Congress should have been responsible in the first place, you have the most recent incident with immigration with Obama. You have the red line, said he would refer to Congress before doing
As
anything.
should have been the case with the airstrikes that were launched on Syria during Trump. Like there should have been no reason to launch. There should have been no ability of Trump to launch those airstrikes on Syria, except for the fact that the War Powers Act allows the president to commit acts of war without congressional approval and has 60 days to seek presidential approval. And that's something that was passed in the 1970s. It's basically saying, hey, we can start a war whenever, just ask for permission later. Shoot first, ask questions later. Is how wars get started nowadays.
Yeah, that does seem so. Even, I don't know, the president has a lot of power to start war. It's um it's not something the president should have.
Well, and that's not what the Constitution entails. Like, if the Supreme Court were to declare the War Powers Act unconstitutional in saying that the only people who could declare war up to and including committing acts of war is the Congress, then the power would devolve back into the Congress, which ostensibly is supposed to represent the people alone.
That's agreed. I don't know. It's just it seems like our freedoms, responsibilities. It's almost as if the government is so big, it's hard to really focus on these responsibilities that we expect our congressmen to take care of. And I know in Lessig's book, he explains that congressmen have less and less time to care about enacting and working on specific issues. For them to just stay in power, or they're spending up to 70% of their time fundraising.
Yeah,
So,
which is a serious problem.
well, yeah. So if you're spending 70% of your time fundraising, you're basically spending 70% of your time not doing your job.
Yeah. I mean, I follow members of Congress on Twitter and constantly just tweet at them, do your fucking job, because that they're not. Like, they'll get on Twitter and say something like, "Oh, what the president is doing is blah 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 blah," without the acknowledgement that they're the people who make the laws. If anybody has the power to do anything about it, they're the ones.
Yeah, they're trying to pass the buck, of course.
Well, yeah, because they need to get reelected.
It almost seems like Congress people should only have access to a single term. Like, I don't mind extending the term a little bit and giving like a single term run, but I don't know, just the whole reelection thing is kind of wasting our tax dollars. Like if we can get a full-time politician to not worry about what's gonna happen the next election cycle, I think so much more could get done, like, at
Yeah.
least double the output that
Well,
Congress has now.
there's a couple things about that. Like, so the House, every House member is up for reelection every 2 years, and the Senate is more stable with terms being 6 years, and um, only a third of the Senate is up for election at any given time. So there's 100 senators, 33 plus an extra one every now and then is up for reelection at any given time. Is it a third or two-thirds? I can't remember.
I'll have to check it out, but a third sounds if it's every 2 years, a third would sound correct.
Yeah, it's a third. Yeah, every 2 years, a third of the Senate's up for reelection.
Yeah, but also the other problem is if you're playing party politics, you're also pooling your funds for other members in Congress.
Well, yeah, that's part of the problem with the party system as it stands. It's like there's nothing in the Constitution that you know says that there have to be two parties or that the way that elections are run is the way that they should be run. Like, it's kind of a joke in looking at the way that things are set up to perpetuate the two-party system. Like, the reason why, in common parlance, you waste your vote if you vote for a third party. That's not how it should be. You should be able to vote based on your interests and not be restricted you know, by what a party that is a private organization chooses to put forth as their candidate. I mean, that's the exact thing that, like, there was a large protest that happened in Hong Kong a few years ago, in which the Chinese government in Beijing was setting up new governmental procedures in which the Hong Kong executive would have to be selected by, well, they go through a general election, and they would have to go through a general election in Hong Kong, right, to select a city executive. And the way that the Communist Party was setting it up, there would be a party vote on X amount of candidates for the position, and 6 candidates would be presented in the general election that were selected by the Communist Party for that election. And there were protests because of that, by saying that it's not actual representative democracy in that case, because we're not actually being able to choose people based on, the merits of the candidate. It's the parties choosing people from who we can choose from. And that's what we have to go through in the United States, because we're forced to choose between a Republican or a Democrat. And almost never do you get a situation where you can vote outside those parameters.
Well, I think there's I try to combat the idea that a vote for a third party is a wasted vote, since technically any vote you make to any person who does not win can be considered a wasted vote. So there's going to be wasted votes regardless of who you vote for, whether it be Democrat, Independent, or Republican. So if you vote for a Democrat, the Democrat loses. Is that a wasted vote? There's going to be wasted votes no matter what.
Yeah, technically speaking, that's how it happens. I mean,
But
go ahead.
yeah, and then when you were talking about Hong Kong, is that what Lessig would refer to as tweedism?
I believe that is a reference that he's made, and I think in the last podcast he did with Brian and Hunter, he brought up Hong Kong specifically. Either that, or it was in Republic Lost 2.0.
Yeah, I never read 1.0, so I know for sure the Hong Kong example is in 2.0. And
Yeah,
he
he
does.
references it as tweedism in there, I think.
Yeah,
Which
I
is,
found
yeah,
a little definition. It says tweedism describes a system within which there are multiple dependencies built into a democracy. In its simplest form, it describes the additional dependence within a democratic process, a dependence beyond the dependence of the people alone. So that would indicate, since the government picks the candidates, there's a loss of dependence on the people alone in that electoral process.
correct, I would say.
But yeah, I think there is importance in the presidency, in the judiciary, but we have the most significant impact, I think, on our congressmen, because the elections are so localized in that respect.
Well, it's supposed to be that way. Like, the House of Representatives is supposed to be reliant on the people alone to get their sovereignty and their power. Like, the power is supposed to emanate from the population. That's the whole. That's the whole. Justification for having a government, is that it's a representative and consists of the people of the United States. And like, with the Congress being set at 435 representatives, like, how true is that to a representative government in the United States when there's 300 million people?
Well, there's a new. When is the next census coming up? And
2020, every 10 years.
2020. 2020. I don't know what's going on, man. It seems like so politically divided, and I've been listening to a lot of kind of the underpinnings of what political parties do to gain power, things like gerrymandering, and it seems like, I don't know, the right now the Republicans have the upper hand with their scientific gerrymandering. Like, they basically use big data, and they're approaching it quite a different way now.
Yeah.
Um, right now, their approach is to win over state legislatures.
Well, I think that's been their approach since the 1990s, and it makes sense since their primary policy goals are implemented at the state level. So, like a lot of what the Republican Party is trying to do is, you know, change school curriculums in places and reduce, I don't know, reduce government spending. I mean, that's what sometimes it's hard to really discern exactly what both parties are trying to do because there are so many different things within what the government does that like it doesn't mesh with what they say, such as like, the Republican Party constantly says reduce government spending, but then they increase spending for defense, which is the largest. Uh, well, I think it's either the largest or the second largest line item in the federal budget every year.
Yeah, the balanced budget, that's just, like, outside of my economic knowledge. It seems like there's so much going on there then that it's so hard to follow and piece together about what's actually going on that, simplistic ideas like balancing the budget seem like a very simplistic idea to people who aren't in the know of what it takes to do so.
Well, and then there's the whole question of do you want to actually balance the budget? And it depends. Like, oh, who was I reading? I was reading David Graeber. Um, he wrote a book called Debt, in which he essentially says that the way that money is generated is through debt. And in a lot of ways, like if you read like how money works, books in general, like there's a great courses series on this on Audible called The History of Money, or like History of Currency. Can't remember. Like it's like money and banking maybe. But the point is that like debt generates well debt generates more money basically, and it does it through magic apparently.
Well, I understand how debt can generate more money. It gives businesses opportunities to grow without the capital, like, you know, get access to capital and then turn that capital into more capital. Like, I understand that concept, but it's weird when it comes to the government.
Well, it you think about it this way, like how are roads built? Like the interstate system in the United States was funded through government bonds. The government sold bonds, which are basically loans from the American people or whomever buys the bonds, and they're paid back with interest, right? And that money funded the building of those roads, and those roads can increase commerce and thus increase tax revenues in order for the government to repay those bonds in the long run.
Well, yeah, I understand that. Like, I know government bonds and are known to be rock solid investments on the long term, but it seems like Wall Street and financial markets very much, well, especially the risky hedge funds and investments really rely on short-term gains and losses,
Well,
depending if you're a short seller or you're looking for a gain in a stock.
that has to do with specifically with money and banking and long and short-term investments. Like short-term investments tend to have lower rates of return if they're less risky. Higher risk, higher reward. So the interest rates on higher risk investments have greater returns.
Yeah, but short-term growth is also, you need those high risk, high reward investments.
I don't think
And
it's a
it's,
question of needing high risk, high reward investments for short term growth. I think that's a function of um, what it is being invested in. You know, as far like it becomes real dark magicy when you start talking. I don't like using that often, but like the way that people assess risk is kind of like um it's actuary science, and like I don't understand actuary science enough to say that you need this to have that, you know.
that's true. Yeah, it's all about values and things of that nature. But going back to Congress, it seems like just nowadays they're pretty much useless. Like
Well, yeah, they
they're
don't
not doing anything.
generally. I don't know. Like it's so daunting to try and think about what's going on with Congress because they haven't really done anything since the 19 maybe the 1990s, and I don't know, there's a lot of narratives pointing to the presidency of Ronald Reagan where he said that government's not the answer, it's the problem, which has created this milieu in the country that the government is always against you. I mean, Ronald Reagan is still held up as one of the greatest presidents of the last 100 years. And, you know, if he's your paradigm and then Newt Gingrich is, you know, still is like the Republican who will never go away, holds that same philosophy that government is by definition a problem. And it's like it makes no sense in respect of how the American system is supposed to work when we're talking about the government is the people and it consists of the people of the United States. Like how can the people of the country be the problem with the country?
Yeah, and isn't 10% roughly of all jobs government or at least public sector?
I think it's like 3%.
Really? I swore it was like 10.
No, it's not that high. It's nowhere near that high.
So it's
Maybe
nowhere
I'm looking
near.
maybe I'm
Like we're talking, so if we're
referencing
talking about 10%, we're talking roughly 30 million. If you say 3%, that's just how much the military has, isn't it?
the military consists of like less than 3 million people.
Yeah, so that would be 1%, just the military.
Less than 3 million. I think it's a total of 2.5 2.5 million including all civilians and reservists.
All right, so we're also got to remember that there's the USPS, there's public schooling.
You know, I have
Um,
Dr. Google. I could look this up.
I swore it was somewhere around 10%, but I could have been wrong.
Percentage of Americans who work in government. I
Or publicly funded jobs.
I'm
So we're talking about
seeing
like school teachers, publicly funded
so we're going with
colleges.
local government too?
Well, as anything that receives federal funding.
Anything almost everything receives federal funding. Like that's part of Republic Loss too, is that that farmers in the Midwest get the majority of their income from government subsidies. So are they government employees?
Well, they're going to lobby for keeping the subsidies.
Of
Yeah,
course.
there's so many different ways that you could look at that, right?
What do you
Well,
mean?
don't they have requirements
Well, I
to
shouldn't say
keep
so many.
those?
I should say like there are at least two very different ways.
I don't understand
Well,
your
okay,
question.
I understand what you mean. Like
Oh,
there's a percentage. If say more than 50% of your income is publicly funded, and I would say that you're pretty much a government worker.
I don't. I think it's more along the lines of who is writing your checks, because there's government contractors who ostensibly those employees are not counted towards working for the government, even though they work in government facilities.
Yeah, but they do have, like, they're not, they have things that they have to follow that are mandated by the government, like specific actions that they have to take. And there's policy written that dictates what they can do.
Isn't that every employment? Every
Well,
realm of
there is
employment?
some to some extent, but we're talking about, if we're talking about public education, they have the Department of Education and well, if we go back to Bush, No Child Left Behind, they all have to follow that. If you're working at a private school, you do not have
Everybody
to.
has to follow OSHA regulations.
Well, okay, so no child. Well, let's take No Child Left Behind for example. Private school does not have to follow that. They don't have to follow Common Core.
So let's talk about an example of No Child Left Behind. Like how did that work?
All right, so one of the things that No Child Left Behind with is it desegregated special needs students. There's specific things you cannot do. Very stupid and insignificant and small things you cannot do nationally. Like you can't mark a student's paper in red when they're doing bad.
Why?
That
No Child
sounds
Left
like
Behind. It's stupid, silly crap. That's what I'm telling you.
well that
That's
sounds
the fucking dumbest shit I've ever heard of.
Well, that's what I'm telling you. Like
sounds dubious to me.
that's well, I'm just saying this is just examples given to me by teachers that they can't do it because of No Child Left Behind. Like there's certain things you can't do anymore.
No Child Left Behind is kind of still around, but it's kind of
No, it's still there.
it's mostly not. Like so the way that it works, it has to do explicitly with federal funding for public schools. Like
They
everything
have
that
to follow
Congress
certain
does,
rules.
yes, in order to get public funding. It's not that they're required to follow them per se. It's if you want to get this money, you have to meet certain standards that are set by the government.
Yeah, but if you're a public school, all your funding comes from the government.
If you're a public school, your funding comes from tax money from the locality, most often property tax, and federal funding is distinct from local funding. That's
Oh yeah,
that's
that's
part of the thing
true, but they do
within
get
the United
both.
States. That's part of the
Yeah,
thing that
but
like colors the arguments in this entire thing is that there are basically three tiers, if not four tiers of government everywhere in the United States except for DC. You know, you have the local government, you have the state government, and you have the federal government. So what part of government is the problem?
well, well, who gives the most funding in public schools? I guess that would be local, right?
I think
Local tax dollars.
generally speaking, yes, when we're talking about schools.
Well, the bad thing about congressional decisions about education is that all schools that receive federal funding have to follow that.
Well,
And the
the
majority
biggest
of
problem with it, in my view, is that it has less to do with what people are required to follow than the fact that, you know, they tie it to results. Like you can't account for results oftentimes.
What do you
you
mean?
mean like funding equals results?
No. That results impact funding. Like that was the thing about No Child Left Behind is that the money that was to be allocated to public schools was tied directly to achievement on standardized tests, and that persisted with Common Core, and everything is based on achievement on these standardized tests.
Could one of you guys please also explain Common Core?
Common Core is just another one of these federal programs about education. Like you can Google it so far as what the specifics are, but it's just like any other federal policy that requires schools or requires farms or requires this, that, or the other to meet certain requirements in order to get federal funding.
Yeah, Common Core is a curriculum requirement.
Yeah,
So
and a lot
it's
of
actually what the teachers are going to teach.
Oh, okay.
but yeah, they need to teach that in order to get federal funding. It's no different, really. It's just more expensive.
Yeah, well, I see what you mean. Federal funding versus direct, employment.
And that's why private schools don't have to follow them, because they're not making their decisions based on federal funding.
Oh yeah, they make their decisions based differently, but
Well, they make it based on the people who fund their school. Like that's how you have Christian schools.
yeah, I agree with that. Were you able to Google that number? Let's see how many people.
I couldn't find
employees.
I couldn't find a good number. How many Americans have government job? Federal, state, and local. Federal, state, and local is 17%.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's way higher. Wow.
Yeah, federal, state, and local is 17%.
Does it explain how they define those though?
This is a Gallup poll.
Oh, it's a Gallup poll.
Yeah, and it's hard. Who work directly? Workers for the government. Yeah, work for the government. Sample size is about 100,000. Most of them are concentrated around military bases. There's more job creation in the federal government than in the private sector, according to Gallup poll, and this is for 2010.
That's pretty old. Wouldn't you say that if someone has any of their livelihood tied to federal or local funding, that this would be kind of a big issue in regards to the politicians not doing anything for them?
Secondary, I think federally it's much lower. Like for federal government workers is much lower nationwide.
Like what number? Roughly?
Around 3 to 4%.
Oh, okay.
So there's a huge discrepancy there. And even in big states like California has a total government workership of 17%, and that's state, local, and federal. So that's like everybody from your garbage collector to a state senator or the local EPA rep.
Or the local FBI office, or,
or any military base.
Yes, and California has a lot of big military bases.
Yep. Sure.
So that makes sense. That makes sense that California would have a lot.
Well, and still federally, it's federal workers in California is still relatively low. I got a fly flying around in my basement, and it's bothering me.
Well, get a pair of chopsticks and do some practice.
That's what I should do. Anyway. What were you gonna ask?
I don't remember because we went off on this federal employee tangent.
Yeah. Oh,
I was just saying, like, a lot of people, quite a few people rely on federal funding.
Well, and a lot of people rely on federal programs
and state programs. Because I know when I went to college, a lot of it was funded by state programs.
Yeah. So what sort of programs are these?
Well, grants and the military and, you know,
housing discounts, you know, food,
police,
you know, everything that the government does,
road
repairing streets and stuff, fixing water main breaks,
fire departments, hospitals.
Yeah. That's one thing that gets me about policing, because it's certainly a local issue to that locality. It's not like
that's a good
something
point.
you could like all the crazy police stuff, it's all local.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do, like almost nothing to do with the federal government.
Well, so much of this stuff has nothing to do with the federal government. That's part of the reason why people are so, I don't know. It feels like the country's a lot smaller than it is when people talk about the federal government. And like living in the DC metro area or in this general area in which I live, it kind of makes it feel like everything's small. But like living in California, you don't really think about the federal government all the time. It's like, I don't know how you have to, what you have to do, you know, intellectually to believe that, you know, people from the local military base are going to come and collect your guns. Like that to me boggles my mind. It's not feasible or even, you know, something that it's so difficult to comprehend how that can be a prevalent idea in people's heads, because it's like there's 300 million people in this country and it's 300 or 3,000 miles long. How are they going to do this? It's going to end up fomenting a civil war. So why would Congress pass a law to confiscate all guns?
Well, from the Alex Jones perspective, and I'm not saying this is a true one at all, a lot of those people, his followers, like their biggest fears are the enactment of martial law.
And that can and has happened. So
when?
I think Katrina had martial law, didn't it? They didn't?
Nope.
Did Bush do that after 9/11?
Nope.
No. I swore Katrina did.
Martial law has only been declared once in the United States on the federal level, and that was during the Civil War.
Oh, really? On the federal level, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That happened in the 70s in Canada.
Well, I don't think, like I'm saying, it's like the Alex Jonesers understand the difference between local martial law due to some type of disaster.
Well, that's like declaring a state of emergency isn't the same as declaring martial law. And that's part of the problem. Like people don't.
What's the difference?
Because a state of emergency isn't like martial law is the ability essentially to suspend the writ of habeas corpus and suspend the constitutional protections of the Fourth and Fifth Amendment. Ostensibly, that's what it's supposed to be. And that's what happened during the Civil War when martial law was declared in the United States. People got arrested, just for no reason on suspicion of them being spies, because there was legitimate spy problems in like DC and Baltimore where, people were gathering information and turning it over to the Confederates and vice versa. I'm sure the Confederate government had similar programs. Like conscription is another one that could fall into that realm, but it doesn't necessarily fall into that realm historically because of the way that Congress has passed those laws regarding conscription. Like they call it the Selective Service Act, and it's been enacted, like 3 different ones have been enacted since the First World War, and like they're very limited in scope. So it's not the same as the general draft laws that were passed during the Civil War. And like martial law was enacted in the South during Reconstruction when they actually had Union troops, protecting Poles from being bombed by the KKK, because there was an insurgency immediately following the end of the war.
Could you get into a little more the difference between conscription and the draft?
They're the same.
Oh, they're the same. Oh, okay.
It's synonyms.
Okay. I thought you were saying that they were different things.
Well, no. What I was saying is that martial law does not necessarily entail conscription and vice versa. Conscription doesn't entail martial law.
Oh, okay.
They can be associated, but they're not explicitly the same.
Okay.
And like there's a lot of devolution of legislative authority to the executive branch and the executive departments since the end of the Second World War, especially, and really since FDR like taking over a lot of different programs that used to be under the purview of Congress and getting reallocated to executive branch departments, like within EPA, for example. EPA has the ability to write regulations for environmental practices, which they have that delegated authority through legislation passed by the Congress. So that's why it's all right. And there are situations where you want that. Like you don't want Congress necessarily to have to sit through committee after committee, going over the justification for reducing sulfur emissions near a coal plant because of acid rain problems. That isn't necessarily something that you want Congress to have to deal with when an executive branch can do so through regulation a little bit better. To me, that's a good efficiency argument. But at the same time, there are things like the creation of more federal agencies like the Immigration Service that are problems because they're doing local law enforcement outside the purview of what the federal government should be able to do. Like in El Paso, they're ostensibly doing raids on places under the auspices of immigration enforcement, basically suspending people's constitutional rights, it like the Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment rights usually, and sometimes Sixth Amendment rights. So
I just learned for the first time yesterday that I had a flawed definition of what the term open borders meant. I had this like one-sided view of it. Well, there's like a more correct legal way of looking at it.
So can you explicate?
Well, if I got this correct, which is entirely possible, then I'm not. I had this idea that open borders literally meant like borders that are completely open to everyone with no restrictions whatsoever. But if I understand correctly, it's more that there's still a registration process, and you still have to go through the borders, and there's still like regulations and stuff like that, but it's much less restrictive, if I understand correctly.
There are a few things here. Like technically the United States has open border agreements with the UK because you don't need a visa to travel there. Like I could get on a plane right now and land at Heathrow, get out, have them stamp my passport, and I'm legally inside the country. And that's the same within any of the EU countries. And within the EU, it's even less restricted in that you don't even have to get your passport stamped to travel from like Spain to France, or from
Right, yeah.
Poland to the UK. You don't have to get
Did
your
I hear
passport stamped.
something recently about them like kind of clamping down on that a little bit?
Well, the UK is leaving the EU ostensibly, so that's a thing. And as far as other
Yeah,
EU
after
immigration
Brexit, I guess,
policies,
right?
I'm not sure. Like, I don't really care what they do in Europe, so let them figure their shit out. As long as they don't start a war. Yeah.
World War III.
And this time we're on the side of the Germans.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I had an idea. Just thinking about the passing of responsibilities. Like I know one of the main things that I don't know if it was a main thing, but one of the things Trump was running on was infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't usually infrastructure isn't that like a locality thing? Like aren't
It
municipal
depends.
bonds usually for building of infrastructure like roads or
Like
like
roads and bridges.
yeah.
Yeah. But there are federal grants for that, but typically it's local bonds that are municipal bonds that are sold for those that build bridges and roads. I mean, when we talk about infrastructure at the federal level, it's usually about ports and airports.
So stuff that most people don't care about much.
Yeah. Like the amount that the federal government could distribute like grants, like they distribute money on everything else, but they're not going to start hiring a bunch of they're not going to hire a bunch of engineers to design more roads, and they're not going to hire a bunch of pavers to rebuild the interstate, because those interstates are built by state. They're built and maintained by state governments anyway.
Well, what about something like um, nuclear energy? Is that something that's more federally?
Anything
Um,
that has to deal with nuclear energy is handled by the Department of Energy, and that's a whole other bag of worms, because the Department of Energy deals with anything that has to do with nuclear writ large, including nuclear weapons.
so that's an important cabinet department position then.
The Department of Energy, yeah.
Well, what I was saying, I guess, some of the promises that presidents make have nothing to do with the powers of a president.
Well, same goes with anything when we talk about the president's proposed budget. The president doesn't set the budget. Congress does. That's one of the only things that they still do, and they haven't done it, set an actual budget in many, many years, because like everything gets put in an omnibus package, or everything like how many continuing resolutions did they go through in the past 8 years? Like from 2010 to 28 or 2016, 2017, it was all continuing resolutions. They didn't pass a budget since like the first year of Obama's presidency. So therein lies one of the problems. But there are federal programs where they can allocate money and it's effective. Like when we talk about Social Security, that's one of those that is effective if you meet the requirements to file for Social Security. Disability is another problem altogether, and I feel like that is not being handled as well as Social Security explicitly. And like there's no federal unemployment, it's all state run or local run. You know, there's no federal like Medicaid, and Medicaid is run through the states. It's money that is granted by the federal government, but it's run through the states. Like that's another thing, is like
Is that
even
the
all
same for
these,
welfare, right?
yeah, with welfare as well, it's run through the states. Except for Social Security. Social Security is run through federal government.
What do both of you guys think about universal basic income in comparison to social welfare programs?
I think that if you have both, it's better. Because what's the point in distinguishing between the two?
Well, I don't know. From
Well,
what I
just
know,
one of the way I've heard it proposed is replacing social welfare programs with a universal basic income. That's the
I,
way that Eric was proposing it to me when I talked with him about that the other day.
to me, a lot of it is a rhetorical hand wave. Like when people talk about replacing welfare programs with universal basic income, I'm for it. And if you're saying that I'm going to take a welfare program and get rid of all the requirements for, you know, checking in for work or drug tests or, needs based to so that I had to file all this paperwork. Feel like if they got rid of all the paperwork, you know, it would be more effective.
I think that might be the argument. I know welfare is pretty damn strict. You do lose some of your Fourth Amendment rights. So, in order to qualify for it, you have to have an inspector that's almost always a former law enforcement agent.
It's basically like you're on parole
Yeah.
for losing your job.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they go to your house, they sift through all your drawers, they question why your kid's not home or if you even have a child, even though that child's probably at school. They question if you're a single parent, so they're gonna go looking through your closets looking for male clothing that may not fit, even though it could be clothing that's like an older son's that still lives there. So it's pretty stringent, and
That's fucked up, man.
yeah, it is. If you wanna read a good book about it, Matt Taibbi, The Divide, he has, a couple sections in there about, how immigrations are handled, how welfare is handled, among other things. But yeah, it didn't used to be like that because when I was a kid, I have no recollection of any inspector coming to my house ever. They just gave us money and we had food stamps and we bought food, we paid our rent, and that was it. There were no inspectors looking through all our drawers and stuff like that. But from what I understand, UBI would be less restrictive than welfare as far as qualifications for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like it's a lot more simple to just have one flat fee for all of those things rather than several different programs for different things and all of those restrictions like you were talking about, Dusty.
Yeah, it's like going on welfare today is such a hard thing, and it's just like dehumanizing to have like some ex cop come in accusing you of everything under the sun and being very frank about, oh, I catch you with this, you're going to lose your benefits, or telling some recipient, oh, you're lying, you don't have a son, where's his clothes? It's like, oh, my son's at work, or my son is in school.
Wow.
It's just stuff like that. The agents that come to your house aren't social workers, they're mainly ex cops.
It's like you're being punished for being poor.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
pretty
welcome
much
to
what it
America.
is. That's the
Like,
history of the United States, man.
yeah, that's how they work. They punish you for being poor. And like if you don't want to work 16 hours a day every day for 5 years to save up maybe enough money to buy a house or get a car that works, then you're a lazy piece of shit in America.
Yeah, and if you're like me and just forego the car but work a lot, then it's just like risks and rewards. Like, yeah, if I had a car, I'd be able to shop around more for employment, but it's also an extra cost I really don't need.
Yeah, that's basically the same conclusion that I came to about having a car. I used to have one, but I don't anymore.
No, I used to have one too, but it wasn't like it wasn't something that I needed to function in life. Like, all I really needed to do is go to work. Like, as we have a car as a family, but there's no point in having 2.
Yeah.
Like it's just another monetary thing you gotta take care of. You got your insurance payments, if you're leasing or financing, you got that to worry about. You know, it's if you have 1 car for the family, that's fine in my book, even though if both parents do work outside the home, as long as you can find a way to get to work, um, like, my costs are so much lower for not like, I could get a car, I could get insurance, but I don't think it's monetarily worth it for me since my place of work is static.
It's
Yeah.
it's so common where I live because there are lots of people with high incomes who live around me. For every member of the family who has a driver's license to have their own individual car. So even if it's like 5 different cars in one family or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's not abnormal.
Yeah,
mean-
if I was a young single guy, of course, you know, I'd have a car, but I'm not, so it's not as important as it was.
I have 2 of
Yeah,
them.
well, I don't have a car right now, and like a great poet once said, you got no money, you got no car, then you got no woman, and there you are.
I don't think I'm familiar with that.
That would
It's
be
a
Young
song.
MC, sir.
Oh, I don't listen to mumble rap.
As Young MC
rap
is
from the
like
80s, dude.
I don't listen to the Funky Cold Medina.
Well, you are a blasphemer for my religion of whatever that is, sir.
What, 80s rap?
Sick burn, bro.
Well, some of it is terrible, though. Actually,
Sick burn.
No, if I became like, okay, if I became the armed person in my profession, then I'd buy a car, but I'm not, and my post is static, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, if you don't need a car, you shouldn't get a car. I think that it's
I figured out the hard way that it's actually a lot cheaper to take the bus. It's just slightly less convenient.
slightly.
Well,
Depends on where you're at.
it depends. Like for me, I work at the same time every single day. The place does not move. It's fairly extremely cheap to take the bus. Like if you would like my transportation costs for the month are like $20.
Yeah.
Like imagine if I had a car to go to the same job that I do, and that's pretty much all I do is just go to my job. You know, it's like an extra cost that I don't need, like the insurance, the monthly payments. Like
when I had a car, it was I think it was like $70 a month for insurance, and I don't remember how much I paid for gas.
Yeah, insurance is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it depends on your car. I always buy old cars, so I don't have to worry about high payments.
Yeah.
Every single car I've bought was from the year 1989.
Oh, nice. I need to get another
That's
89
the year I was
Firebird.
born.
What was that?
I need to get another 89 Firebird.
Oh,
that's a good idea.
Well, I had 89, like, I guess, quote unquote, reliable vehicles. So my first car was an 89 240 SX. My second car. Yeah, I wish I like when I got it, I was super young. I didn't know about car maintenance. I drove that thing into the ground. But yeah,
I have to change my oil.
Yeah, I think when I sold it, it was like at 210,000 miles, but that was my first car. My second was an 89 Grand Prix Pontiac. And the car after that, well, I do have a vehicle that was not a car, but that was a 2004 Ninja.
Those are not bad motorcycles.
No, it was a workhorse. It was my commuter bike, 70 miles a gallon. You know, that was during like the $5 a gallon era. So
Yeah.
I was not like sorry that I bought that as my main mode of transportation. It was hard lugging stuff around. Um, like if I went to do a gig, I'd have to borrow a car. But
Yeah.
if I was just going around places, to school or to work, it was very much easy. And I was single, so I didn't have to do a whole lot of transportation of stuff,
Or people.
or people. After that, I got an '89 Toyota Celica convertible. That was the last car I had.
Yeah. I like Toyotas. Anyway, what were you talking about? Oh yeah, Congress.
Yes, we get off on tangents.
I think that the most important thing for me when it comes to Congress is that, you know, Congress people spend less time dialing for dollars and more time passing laws, and that people, you know, start looking at Congress as a means to, you know, get what they want done instead of them being the enemy.
That sounds like a more helpful perspective.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I also found some, I don't know what you think about this, but there was someone proposing a Kickstarter type service, but what it does is it just create packs around certain issues.
I don't know what I think about that, because it just perpetuates the problem.
Yeah,
Like
that's what I thought.
it's a pay to play system, and if you don't have money, you don't get representation. So how is that democracy? It's oligarchy. No matter how big the demographics of the oligarchs are, it's still not democracy.
Well, how do we fix the system without playing the game?
I think it's like borderline impossible.
I think it has to. I think it requires a mass movement, like of the scale that hasn't been seen since the 1950s, 1960s.
Well, the thing is, I know there are some that are playing the game to try to get finances out of politics. Are you familiar with Wolfpack?
I am.
Yeah, there's one of them. And it's like your enemy, it's a pack, but they're trying to use a pack to get money out of politics.
Yeah. I don't know what I think about that. Like it's a good strategy.
Like
It's a good
what would
strategy.
be,
Yeah, I would say so.
what is the alternative that people propose for like getting money completely out of politics?
Well,
Con-
a constitutional amendment.
amendments. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a 28th Amendment being bandied about in this regard.
Yeah, I know the Wolfpack was trying to get local, state legislatures to call for an amendment for um, campaign financing.
Yeah. If you look it up, 28th Amendment, there are a bunch of different things regarding it, and most of them are regarding an overturn of Citizens United, which I don't know.
All right. Well, Jake, in the comment
Seem
section,
hesitant about that, Isaiah. Oh, sorry, Dusty.
I was going to say, Jake in the comment section asks about. Says, "Isn't a constitutional convention a horrible idea too?"
I don't know. Like when it comes to trying to fix Congress and trying to fix the money in politics things, it feels so intractable when you conceptualize it, because it's like, how are we going to get a Congress that how are we going to get a Congress that can work for the people without having some huge movement like a constitutional convention or a constitutional amendment or something of that nature to try and fix it? Like we have a like legal statutes that are established as of this time that basically say that people can spend as much money as they want to give to politicians or give to people representing politicians in order to get them elected. And also that not only can people do that, but corporations can do it as well, because corporations have the same protections of the Constitution as individuals, which those create conflicts of interest within the political structures, to the point where there's no real way to try and differentiate between what the people want and what a corporation may want, because Walmart is not the United States, but that's the way it ends up being. Like, ExxonMobil isn't the United States, but they're writing laws. Like, people in DC, so many of them are lobbyists, and so many of those people are writing laws versus, people in Congress writing laws. And that in and of itself should give Americans pause.
Well, but there's always a big deal about lobbyists as well, is because not all of them are corporate backed, right?
I mean, it depends on, is an NGO a corporation?
Well, there's also labor unions and things of that nature.
Well, I don't think that labor unions and corporations are all that different in a lot of ways. It's just who they represent.
Yeah, I guess it's just the dichotomy between, if it's a corporation, you're thinking, okay, there's some rich guys at top making most of the money, and then the labor union is mostly about workers and their protections. But I think I see your point, though.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on how the unions run, and I've never been part of a union, so I have no idea.
Well, I know there's the whole right to work laws.
Yeah, and that's the state of affairs in many places. Like,
I've had to become part of unions in jobs that I've had in the past. Or no, wait, no. They gave you a choice, and like the choice to be part of the union included like special privileges during your lunch breaks in the lunchroom and stuff like that.
Yeah,
yeah, that's how they usually work. The right to work is basically because the unions usually lean Democratic. A lot of people don't like putting money into political beliefs that they're not in line with. So if you're like a conservative and you have to pay union fees, there are certain states like in California where you have to pay the fee, but if you don't want to contribute to their political issues, you can contribute a lesser fee, but you still are required to pay some fee.
Well, and it becomes a difficult situation, because that's like, how much should unions be able to affect the political process? And that gets back to the question before, like, who gets a say in politics? And it should it ride on collections of people like a union or a corporation, or should it ride on individual people and the voter alone? And to me, the answer is, like, everything should emanate from the voters and not from organizations such as even political parties. Like, why is everybody in Congress a political party? That shouldn't be. Like, there need to be more Bernie Sanders.
Well, it's because it's easier to vote if someone is in a political party, especially for those who aren't engaged in politics. That means you actually have to follow and see what this specific politician, like what their plan is, what their policy positions are. So, if you just see a D or R on that ballot, It's
gives
so
you an
much
easy,
easier.
yeah.
Yeah, it's so much easier to compartmentalize your ideology and just pick the one that consistently goes with specific views.
Would it be too outside of the box to say something like there are too many things that fall into elected positions? Like should things like school board be elected positions? You know, things like that.
That's a
Well,
good
I
question.
guess it depends on the school. And those for public schools, shouldn't the people of that locality be allowed to elect their board, or at
Well, but
least?
at the same time, there are people who don't have kids who go to. There's people who don't have kids, and there's voters who aren't affected by the school system.
I've voted for school board members many times, even though I don't have children.
Yeah.
Well, even if you don't have children, the people that are coming out of those systems, if they stay local, are still part of your society.
Yeah.
That's true.
I
Yeah.
mean,
What do you guys think of the idea that many people have proposed of there being more major political parties in the States? Like, for example, here in Canada, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a better or worse idea, but there are basically three major political parties instead of two. And they're like instead of basically the equivalent of the conservatives and the liberals, there's also the NDP, which are kind of like the maybe I would classify them as maybe like the progressive party or something like that.
well, the problem that you find yourself in the United States is not so much that there are only two parties. It's more so that the way that the election system is set up selects for two parties. Like it's
Yeah, there's definitely like I would say there are more than two parties. Like there are parties within the Democratic Party,
Yeah,
there are parties within
I
the
mean like the
Republican
major
Party.
parties. Yeah, I know that there are much more smaller parties.
well, it's not even that. It's like the
No, I'm
reason
saying
why,
even the large parties have parties in them.
yeah.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what I'm saying.
Oh,
Like, in the Republicans, but you got Tea Parties, you got neocons, you got a bunch of different type of conservatives.
Yeah,
The same
different.
thing goes for Democrats as well.
But because of
that's
the
a
way
very
that
good point. Yeah.
it's set up has to do more with money and the voting system. Like you can't you can't run if you don't have money is the long and short of that. And like the way that people get elected, it has a lot to do with how the elections are set up. Like if the way that you choose your candidates is through a primary and you have to have, you know, ballot access to get onto the sheet. And the way that it's set up selects for only, you have to have X amount of money to get up a ballot spot, or you need X amount of preliminary votes or signatures to get on the ballot in the first place. It makes it exceedingly difficult for a third party candidate to get on the ballot. And then when you
It's
get
like how that happened with Gary Johnson, how he couldn't get into the debates because he couldn't get enough votes to get on the ballot or something like that, right?
well, the way that they wrote the ballot law, and which isn't set by the state or the federal government, it's set by the states individually. Like you have to have X amount of support in different national polls in order to get a ballot berth or to get onto a presidential debate. So therein lies some of the problems implicit within it. But like when we're talking about the president of the United States, it's all a matter of name recognition more so than anything else. And like with Congress, it should be like California just started a new election procedure for Congress, um, called the jungle voting system, in which everybody is thrown on a primary ballot, and then the top two people who get the most votes on that primary ballot, regardless of political party, go to a runoff. So essentially, it's a um, two-step election, which is, in my view, better. But like so many media outlets talk about how, oh, because of this, there's no real opposition candidate in this district. Like there's a lot of elections that end up being a Democrat versus a Democrat. Like in the last California state Senate election where Kamala Harris got elected, it was a Democrat versus a Democrat for the state Senate seat. And
Wouldn't that be better according to what you were talking earlier about how it should be like based on individuals getting elected rather than their party?
yes, it is better in that respect, and I support that structure.
Yeah. Because
Over
wouldn't you say that Bernie and Trump were basically third party candidates?
Yes, that's often the argument that's made about them, is that they're both third party candidate, like outsider candidates. Um and like I don't know. With Trump I feel got elected because Hillary Clinton was just so bad. Um
That's probably a large part of it.
and Bernie lost because the Democratic Party is so bad. So yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And like with Congress, that's part of the problem with these congressional races, is that the people who are running for these different positions are the people who are running for these positions are becoming beholden to party platforms and party rhetoric that doesn't necessarily reflect the views of the people in the district that they're running. And couple that with the fact that, the average district has 700,000 or 800,000 people in it, and you're not going to have the full representation, that you could have if you doubled the amount of representatives in the Congress. Let's say there were 800 Congress people, then it was 400,000 people per district. That's at least a little bit better than what you have now.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know, man. The House of Representatives is supposed to be the most representative of the people. But then again, yeah, is the turnover for House pretty quick? Because I know you said the terms are pretty short.
Well,
But do the
they're
actual
voted in. They're up every 2 years, but oftentimes people in these districts run unopposed, or like they de facto are unopposed, and people end up being 30-year congressmen. Like in my district back in California, like the representative there is Doris Matsui, who's been in the Congress since 2006, and prior to that, it was her husband who was the congressperson who was there for like 20 years. So why should, like, that's one thing that strikes me as totally un-American, that
The
a
dynasty
congressional seat,
aspect.
basically it's not even a dynasty, it's a seat of nobility. Like it's so gross. Like even if she's a good congressperson, it makes no sense with American ideals to elect people based on their family, connections. But that's how things end up working, because it has to do with money. Like people are not necessarily selected by virtue of the policies that they support, but more so on the letter next to their name and the dollar number that stands behind them.
And their last name.
There's also trust as well. Is also a big factor, right?
What do you mean?
Well, there are people that have a lot of money behind them, but if you don't trust them, they're not going to get anywhere.
Oh yeah, but that's not something that can really be measured, is it?
I think that depends on the person too.
I don't know. I guess you can't really. The only thing you can really measure it by is by polls, I would assume.
Well, yeah, and oftentimes, like I would say, since it ends up being a two-party vote that is not dependent on a percentage of the electorate showing up for the election, that you could have somebody who's completely untrusted be elected if they run unopposed in a district, and 10% of the voting population shows up, they could still get elected. So I don't know, because I have a feeling that not a whole lot of people really trusted Donald Trump, but he got elected.
Exactly.
And
I just think they hate libtards so much that they're like, I don't care. I'm just going to go ahead and vote for this guy.
Fuck you, libtards. I'm voting for Trump.
Yeah. Well, and that's I don't even think that a lot of people were of that mindset. Like, if you're faced with
even a lot of Bernie supporters went over to Trump because of they had a lot of similar views about certain things, working class strife, trade was another big thing they both aligned on. They had a lot of things that they aligned on. And, people were calling these diehard, what were they called? Never Hillarys. I guess there were never Trumpers and never Hillarys.
Yeah. Well, I didn't end up voting in the general after I voted for Bernie in the primary, because like I was not going to give a vote to Hillary Clinton. And for me, regardless of who ended up in the Oval Office, nothing I wanted to happen was going to happen. And like that's evident based on, I didn't vote for Obama because a lot of the things that were being bandied about were like same old shit, even though he ran on hope and change.
Well, I had to vote because I'm in a purple state, so our vote.
Oh, so you had to vote for Congress?
Well, the vote in a purple state actually counts, even though I didn't vote for either of them either. I still voted.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like.
Wait, could you explain a little bit more about how that works?
What do you mean?
A purple state?
Yeah.
A purple state is a state that could go either way. Like it could go red or blue. A blue state is California, and a red state is Texas, and Virginia's purple. It means it could flip. It's so like the election. I think Virginia was very narrowly won by Hillary.
Yeah.
Like there's no overwhelming majority of party members in that state.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, because so many people live in the vicinity of Washington, D.C.
And then you have down south. Like, if you just look at the blue parts of Virginia are small. The red parts of Virginia are very large, but it's sparse.
Yeah.
But the population equals out for the number of voters for red or blue.
Yeah. That's how it is in a lot of places. I mean, if you look at the parties in the like, there's so much misleading publishing on party affiliation in the United States. The way that they basically write about it in like Politico or the New York Times is to say that everybody's polarized, when more like last time I looked at the numbers, about 45% of the American population is not affiliated with the party, right? And the way they write that off is to say, but among those people, they have a tendency to vote for one or the other, always. and they write that off as saying that people are polarized. But if they were really in tune with that party, they would probably register for that party. It's a lot of it's the voting system that forces you to vote between one or the other.
Yeah, because, you know, the whole primary, like if you're an independent, you gotta switch your affiliation if you want to take part in a primary. So that's kind of like a lot of the Bernie Sanders stuff had to do with people having to switch to be a Democrat in order to vote for him.
Yeah, and unfortunately for me, I did that to vote in California, even though I didn't have to. So I still get bullshit from the Democratic Party in California because I haven't changed my registration yet.
Yeah, I think I just changed mine recently. I still get all the bullshit emails and calls, like robocalls still.
I
It's
still get emails from the Liberal Party in Canada because I said something nice about Justin Trudeau once.
huh.
What do you mean you said something nice about him?
I said that I supported his decision to legalize weed on social media, and they've been sending me emails since then.
Oh, congratulations. Canada's Canada has less people living there than the state of California.
Yeah, that's true.
It's kind of funny to me. There are 2 flies in my basement now. I'm going to kill them.
Good idea.
Gotta use those chopsticks, man.
I would never be able to do that. I'm terrible with chopsticks.
Oh, I love chopsticks, man. It's the best way to eat Chinese food and Japanese food.
Are you good with them?
Yeah.
Yeah? I'm terrible. Yeah. I could improve that if I wanted to, though, I guess.
Well, my Japanese class made me good at them because she basically taught us how to use them in class.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I didn't really know how to use them before then. Like, I have an unorthodox way of using them, but I find my way more dexterous than the regular way of using them.
How so? Do you arrange your finger and thumb differently?
Yeah, so it's almost like the chopsticks are connected to my thumb and forefinger, the way I hold them.
Okay.
Like, I know the orthodox way, it's like you're kind of smashing your fingers together to create torque.
Yeah,
But for
that's what I
me,
have trouble with.
no, for me, it's just the way I hold them, they're attached to my thumb and index, so I just snap them together and hold
So you
stuff
don't
with it.
have that finger in the middle.
No.
Okay.
I just have, I don't know, it's kind of weird. I just hold them weird, but I like the way I hold mine. And my teacher said it was acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the fuck? This is the weirdest conversation about Congress I've ever had.
Well, Dusty said that you should kill those flies with chopsticks.
Yes. What have we learned today?
This shit is fucking complicated. That's what I've learned.
We learned that there needs to be a constitutional convention or amendment proposal.
I agree with that, to get Congress back to work.
Yeah, I think those were the 2 prescriptions Lessig had at the end of 2.0 was one or both, with both parties involved in both conventions and amendments. So otherwise it would just be a worthless shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to just pivot to like some bullshit free for all stuff, or do you want to wrap this up?
I could go free for all. You want to talk about the Gazette shooting?
No, because that's a little too close to where I live.
Come on, man. You got to have some type of
I haven't looked up the news on it, and like people I know work in that general area, and I'm like not surprised that it happened again in Maryland, a mass shooting, because people are fucking crazy here. So
I was doing research and I found out that there are some crazy ass people there. Like, there was another guy from that same area who threatened to kill a bunch of members of Congress. he got
Yeah.
arrested and put in jail.
yeah,
Whoa.
don't threaten to kill people.
Yeah, don't threaten to kill Congress, especially if you live less than 100 miles away from.
Well, even if you live in Hawaii, you shouldn't threaten to kill Congress people.
Was it on social media that they did that?
Fuck if I know.
Because like
I
people
don't
get
know.
carried- people obviously get carried away like motherfuckers on social media.
Yeah, but come on, like,
I'm
how
not
can you
saying
be
that
that dumb?
excuses death threats at all. I'm saying people should stop behaving that way.
Yeah, I don't know if they found out if he was actually acting on it or just making threats. I just know that the guy was from the same town as the dude that shot up the Gazette.
Yeah, Annapolis.
Yeah, Annapolis specifically. I don't know. It's AA is the name of the town. That's the abbreviation for it. It's like a part of an Annapolis
Oh,
area.
Anne Arundel.
Yeah,
that's the county that we live in. That I
yeah.
live in.
So yeah, they're from the same county. I guess crazy people live in that county or something.
Yeah. It's the biggest county in Maryland. Well, I think it's the biggest county, and it's kind of like it's on the border of Baltimore, and it's also filled with a bunch of I don't know how I would describe it. It feels like there may or may not have been a bunch of Confederates who lived here during the Civil War. So
Oh yeah, the Gazette guy was a former. He worked for the Bureau of Labor.
ah,
He was a government worker. It was weird because I saw pictures of the dude. You could definitely tell he was like some weird guy. Um, I don't know if he knew he was weird, but he definitely looked the part.
How so?
I don't know. I think anybody who rubber bands their beard, like unironically, is destined for failure.
What does that even mean?
putting a rubber band around their beard. I think it's pretty.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Well, if you work in a
Who made that
government,
rule?
well, okay. So if you're gonna go out, go all out. But if you're just gonna do that and wear like dorky t-shirts and shorts and fedoras, you're not gonna get anywhere. Like you're not gonna get anywhere with women. You're not gonna get taken seriously. You know, if you're gonna go that way, go all the way. You know, don't just do the beard thing and then look like
And do it
a
genuinely
dork.
too.
Yeah. I'm just saying, people like that don't have some special skill are setting themselves up for failure. Like,
Yeah.
I don't mind if some dude that's like a blacksmith and he makes cool weapons for like movie sets, and you know he has like this, you know, beard that's all rubber band up. But if you're a dude who works for the Bureau of Statistics and women don't pay attention to you because you're just like some drone and weird guy, that's gonna work against you. I'm sorry.
Yep.
So that's what I thought. The guy looks nuts anyway. I don't know if you've seen him.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, and then I don't know. There's like this big hubbub. I was like, oh, it's because of Trump that people are killing journalists. No, like,
Yeah,
the guy's
bro.
just crazy, man. That's all it was. He's just a psycho who's been going after that publication for a while because they published a story about him.
Okay.
Him. Yeah. Because he was like some creepy stalker. The local publication wrote an article about him, and then he tried to sue them for defamation, and even his own lawyer was afraid of him.
Holy shit.
The guy's own lawyer thought he was gonna kill him.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's ridiculous. It has nothing to do with Trump. The guy was just nuts.
People blame everything on Trump.
Yeah. They try. Well, anytime there's like these big, shocking news events, they try to paint it as some type of political statement or action. Mostly, it's just crazy ass people with missing that all their faculties. So I don't think any of these people are not psych. All of them are mentally damaged in a big way, in an extreme way. None of these are rational, clear-thinking people, obviously.
Yeah.
The whole blaming it on some political side thing, I think, is stupid.
Yeah, I think
Because
so.
none of these political sides are calling for actual violence.
No.
People are stupid and they conflate things, but Trump may be an idiot, but he's not telling people to go gun down other people in the street.
Yeah. In fact, he's spoken out against specifically that in public too.
Well, I know he spoke out against the whole shooting. He said journalists should never fear for their life. I know he hates the media, but
Yeah.
he has a personal bias. Like the media always tore him apart.
Yeah. Everything bad that's said about him is fake news.
Well, the news has been saying bad stuff about him before he was even, on The Apprentice.
I mean, to him, everything bad about him that the news says is fake news.
Oh yeah. The concept of fake news is so dumb, but most news is not fake. It's just slanted.
Yeah.
And sometimes pedantic and unnecessary.
I would say often unnecessary.
Well, like, what do we need for the news? I think there's also a giant conflation in the influence of CNN and Fox News. They are not as powerful and as people think they are.
Isn't there like their main viewer demographic, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong about this though, don't they tend to be like of the older generation who are like more used to watching major cable news programs?
Yeah, both CNN and Fox, their major demographic is 60 plus.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I was looking over numbers the other day about weekly views. Fox only gets 2.5 million a week.
That's that's like not much more than a lot of different podcasts.
Well, we're talking about the whole week here. If we're just talking about
actually, that's much less than one episode of many podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's a very small window of impact that they have. And we're talking about Fox, and Fox has the largest audience of cable news networks. So if we're taking, we're talking about CNN and MSNBC, they're even smaller. So it's, I don't know, it's just people go on Fox News telling people to do this and that, and Fox News isn't that powerful at all. They don't reach as many people as
I wouldn't be surprised
if
the majority of people, based on those numbers, then hear about what Fox News and CNN and the other major news programs are saying, like second or third hand from the internet.
Well, some of it is. Some of it's reinterpreted by internet personalities. Some of it is just random BuzzFeed articles or what have you articles popping up on the internet. But as far as like viewership and reporting, Fox News and CNN, they're not big players really. as much as people like to think they are.
Well,
Yeah.
they have the biggest credentials because they have money.
Yep.
And it's funny why, like, I know their audiences are slowly dwindling. Oh wow, it sounds like a guitar.
Sorry,
Hey,
that was me.
Sam's Bulldog.
What's up, brothers?
Hey.
Yeah, so I just think the influence of cable news is not as big as people think it is.
Yeah, I agree.
How am I feeling this evening?
Doing good, man. We're just
Good.
riffing.
Yeah.
I've been listening. I was battling it out on Twitter with a guy whose handle is scam. Kind of know what's going on. Not that I want to talk about him or the nature of facts. We're not gonna,
No,
we will. All that shit's
Sam
off.
Harris is banned from this conversation, and so is the nature of fact. So is
Facts, free will,
absolute.
Sam
True
Harris.
subjectivity.
None of that stuff today, at least for a month or two. But yeah, we're just riffing about how I think cable news media is hyped up more than what it actually is, as far as like influence. Like, I'm not gonna say that they don't influence politically minded people. They certainly do, but
you were
it's
saying
not
that like
far-reaching, is what I'm saying. It's like if you take something like Roseanne, who had political topics on it, and this is just a TV sitcom. Like, more people watch that show in its half-hour time slot than they would Fox News or CNN for the entire week.
and you were saying that Fox gets 2.5 million viewers a week and they get more than any other cable news show, right?
That's correct. They lead the ratings in cable news. But like I said, it's 2.5 million a week. That's not.
And Ed, like, for example, in an episode of the average like super popular podcast, like one episode could easily tend to get 1 million views or more, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you take a look at Rogan, I think, what are his numbers? Like 50 million a month or something?
Yeah.
They're pretty
He
high.
probably gets like an average of 1 million views per episode, I would say, sometimes a little less.
Well, that's just on YouTube, but his downloads on podcasts are probably 10 times higher than that.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just think.
And the guy's stoned for every fucking show. He's got the best job in the world.
Yeah.
Come to work, get high, have a conversation, and go home and live in a giant house.
Well, he did have sober for October, so there was a month where he hadn't
True.
been stoned. But yeah, pretty much he is stoned to some extent in every episode. But I think that aids him. I don't know. I did not compare the conversations he had between the sober October and his usual fare, but yeah, when they're stoned, he tends to have like these weird conversations with people.
Yeah.
That come out of left field.
That's for sure.
Well,
but
releases your inhibitions.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just don't think people should be blaming stuff on cable news because it's not as relevant as it used to be. Which is good and bad in its own ways.
Yeah.
Can I just mention something briefly, that because you guys brought up that shooting in DC, and I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
What I saw immediately in social media was it's Milo Yiannopoulos' fault.
Yeah, that's another thing too.
And that is Trump's fault too.
I mean, are you kidding me? Or it's the president's fault because he talks about them being the enemy of the people. I mean, that is the most irresponsible And again, it's done on all sides. I think that is incredibly irresponsible to blame, to even bring up that certain other people said things. I mean, this is how free speech gets quashed, right? This is the fucking morality police and the free speech police. Oh no, you can't even say that because somebody might do something insane.
Yep.
That's a slippery slope, man. That really bothers me.
Well, it's just people who think they're informed, but they're not. Like, whenever you see these events, you can't
Like,
automatically blame
me,
somebody
Dustin.
or something.
Dana Lash, you know, that right-wing woman talking head.
Oh, I'm familiar with her mildly.
She said like, apparently she said like, oh, journalists should be curb stomped. Okay, some jackass talking head Dana Lash curb stomped, which again I'm not for. I'm not defending what the content of her speech, but to any way associate that with a fucking mass murderer, I mean, I'm sorry.
Was that her actual statement?
What's that?
Was that her actual statement? Like, did she actually say that journalists should get head stomped?
Yeah, she said it in the past. You know, I mean, rhetoric is dialed up. There's no two ways about it. But
and then she appears as a talking head, and she's saying that journalists should get head stomped.
But I think the point that you're making is that people are equating that with mass murderers, right, Ed?
I mean, let's not be so quick to understand the motivation of someone who goes in there. I mean, this wasn't random. 24 hours that this guy had a beef and the whole 9 yards. I mean, free speech, caustic free speech has been part of this country since its founding. I mean, go back to the founding fathers, whatever. I mean, it just
really, like, whenever these discussions like that come up, I think our Constitution is so robust that I really don't have to worry about free speech much. Like, it's not something I'm particularly worried about. I know it seems strange not to worry about it, but the First Amendment is just one of those amendments that is almost undeniable in all situations. Like, I don't have to worry about the government coming and telling me I can't can't give certain opinions. Like, I don't feel that's ever going to happen unless someone gains authoritarian dictatorial control of the country, and I'm not afraid of that at all. So a lot of these fears regarding it, I don't have those
I agree
fears.
with that.
I think Isaiah wanted to say something about that.
I was just gonna say that, you know, I don't think that people calling out Milo Yiannopoulos for being a cunt is necessarily calling for him to be silenced. I think it's more like looking at him and being like, hey, this guy's a cockbag and he sucks. And calling out the president is of the same vein, because like the undercurrent within that is that with the Red Hen situation and the Maxine Waters situation, conservatives were saying, oh, return to civility. And that was the whole, like, be civil in your discourse. And the entire undergirding of every conversation henceforth, or thus far, not henceforth, but everything that has been said by like Milo or the president has been abusive and uncivil in its nature. So that specifically was a response to their bullshit and looking at how their rhetoric is reflective of more things that happen. It was just disgusting what Milo said. in general, and it's been disgusting a lot of the things that the president has said, you know, either during the election process or while he's been in office. So, you know,
Agreed.
saying that the president is gross or that Milo is a shithead, I don't think is calling for them to be silenced in any measurable or demonstrable way. And the inability to call somebody a shithead or being harangued for calling them a shithead and then being accused of calling for censorship is kind of disingenuous.
Yeah. Well, I think by the same token of what you were saying, Ed, I think you were saying, and I agree with the sentiment that people should have the right to say disgusting things about other people.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's a good question for us: is this Red Hen restaurant, whatever it was called, where that the proprietress did not serve Sanders?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you my view. That was a mistake. Again, this is my personal opinion. I loathe that woman because of what she does. Now, but I don't think that she should be discriminated against in that way. That is not helpful. And
helpful for who?
Shitbag, what's her name?
Not helpful for? It's the proprietor of an institution refusing service based on whatever criteria they find necessary. But it's the same thing. Politics. It's the same thing that the Supreme Court just affirmed with the gay cake situation. So how is it not quote unquote helpful? Who is it not helpful for? If you're going to use it in a purely
I disagree with that ruling as well. What I'm saying, I'm just saying it's.
Why do you disagree with that ruling, Ed?
I guess the cliche slippery slope. I mean, next it's going to be somebody not wanting to serve somebody wearing a MAGA hat.
I have no problem with that.
Oh,
yeah, neither do I.
I do.
Why?
It just strikes me as. So what are we going to have?
You could just go into the business without a MAGA hat. It's like if
well,
someone says listen. What if somebody?
To wear that hat.
Yeah, but listen. What if somebody comes into a shirt, comes in there with a shirt that says "fuck you, bitch"? Do you have the right not to let that person in? Yes.
And like, do you think those types of restaurants would be like more popular than other restaurants in the area if they kept making rules and denying people like that, Ed?
We draw the line on who we're going to let in and who we're not going to let in, because I mean, this is going to end in a bad place. That is my overarching concern, right?
No, there's a reason why the slippery slope thing is a fallacy, Ed. Yeah. A slippery slope is a fallacy because it's not looking at the totality of circumstances within any given action. It's saying that one action will lead to another action by convention. And that doesn't necessarily follow within the logic implicit within the action itself. Excluding Sarah Sanders from your restaurant isn't the same as excluding somebody who voted for Trump from your restaurant. Not only that, we have fucking secret ballots in this country, so you don't have to disclose to anybody who you voted for if you don't want to.
Yeah, and then there's always been discrimination with the admittance to public and private, but take like a nightclub where they want a certain dress code. They're not going to let a dude with flip-flops and shorts in. Should they allow him? I don't think they should.
Or pool halls that prevent people from showing up wearing motorcycle club shirts or colors. Things like that. Or
not here.
Yeah, that's normal. People are discriminatory based on a lot of things, and I don't think that political beliefs are a protected a protected class, which is what you seem to be arguing. And if you're going to say that,
Well,
typically the
The
things that
dress
are protected are things that cannot be changed about the individual.
yeah, I mean, I can see. I think I can see the difference between a dress code violation, quote unquote, and not serving someone because of politics.
so should Republicans be allowed to vote in a Democratic primary then? Because that's discrimination based on political beliefs.
Well,
Good
no,
point.
of course not. The rules, no, you can only join one party maximum. Then there's good reasons for all of that.
But those are private institutions. Those are private institutions. They're not federally, they're not federally administered institutions. And this is something that was hammered home constantly during the last election when we were talking about primaries and how, Trump or Bernie Sanders were going to get a nomination from the party. That, at the end of the day, it's the decision of the party, not the people, because they're private institutions. So by virtue of them being able to exclude any member of the populace from voting in their primary, that is a private institution determining to discriminate against somebody based on their political beliefs.
I don't see a problem with it. It doesn't cost anything.
You see a problem with that versus a private institution excluding service from somebody, not only based on their beliefs, but also their job.
Your analogy doesn't run through. I mean, I don't see the analogy at all. Okay, at all. The problem I have,
private institution excludes service from an individual based on their political beliefs, and we're saying that it's based on Sarah Sanders' political alignment, not necessarily even her job or what she has demonstrated to be her character as press secretary. I'm granting you that it was by virtue of her political beliefs alone.
No, it's because of her job, which would probably align with her political beliefs.
Well, I'm saying I'm granting you the widest berth here by saying it's purely by virtue of their political beliefs. Now, let's say I were to run any business that's not even necessarily a restaurant, and let's say you're a Nazi, and I run a deli. Should I let Nazis into my deli? I have the choice to exclude Nazis from my deli. Even though you can be a Nazi in the United States, those are politically held beliefs, and I have the right to refuse service based on my political beliefs being in conflict with yours.
Yeah, I don't know how you would identify a Nazi. You mean somebody with
Let's say they're wearing a swastika. Let's make it easy.
Let's make it easy or applicable. Say somebody like Chris Cantwell.
My concern is simply that what's her name? The American woman the idiot that Trump always goes after. She's been around forever. She came out and said she upped the rhetoric that they're going to do the same thing.
Oh God!
I'm just saying that
Maxine Waters. You're talking about Maxine Waters, and that's totally like.
So she responds by saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to do it more," and all the rest of it. This is not the way to fucking. We're not going to get to the promised land. And if a guy
promised land, Ed,
comes into a deli, if a guy comes into a deli, if I owned a deli and a guy comes in for a cup of coffee and he's got a swastika tattoo, I don't see that it's any of my business. Yeah, it's free speech.
It's your business because you're the one who is deciding to sell them something or not. That is incumbent upon you as the business owner. And like,
I don't know that I have caught the point I'm saying is I don't know that I have caught like what's my reasoning for doing that.
It's your free speech to deny people service based on a political belief. That could be construed as politically. So
you agreed with that? You agreed with that gay cake ruling?
That is a harder thing because gayness is supposed to be a protected class under the 14th Amendment. Sexuality is supposed to be protected under the 14th Amendment, which is different than a political belief, which is not protected under the 14th Amendment.
No, it's a free speech issue. There's no difference.
There is a difference because you can't discriminate you cannot discriminate against people on certain protected classes. You can't discriminate people based on race, including white people. Like if a white dude walked into my store, I couldn't say, "Hey, I don't want to serve you because you're white." That would be discrimination. So
yeah, it would only be a free speech issue if that restaurant was owned by the government.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not asking what the law is. I'm asking what your view was. Do you personally agree?
It's not a free speech issue, and I do not personally agree with the action of the business owner in the gay cake situation. But I do agree with the business owner in the red hen situation.
And you and you agree with their right to make that decision, Isaiah?
With the right of the people in the gay cake situation to make that decision, I am unsure. And I would lean on being no, I'm not okay with them making that decision. But I also think it was a bad faith decision by the gay couple to go there and ask for a cake in the first place. But then again, it gets into another argument, like should people who have atypical lifestyles be discriminated against in any respect in America? And that's a different question than political beliefs. How much is lifestyle reflected on political beliefs? And to what extent can we discriminate within that realm? That's a whole other like conversation to be had that is outside of the merits of these two separate cases. Like people like let's say that Sarah Sanders went to the Red Hen and they closed down the entire store for her and served her special. That would also be discrimination based on her political beliefs. That would be beneficial to her. But somebody who would support Sanders would see that as laudable versus kicking her out. It's only the refusal that is up for debate here, it seems, not the pure act of discrimination. So it's like it's contradictory to say that you can have political beliefs and commit a political act in refusing service to somebody based on, say, their position at the White House, or say their political beliefs, but then to not say that you're basically privileging one political belief over another one. You're privileging the customer over the proprietor of the business.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, the gay cake is difficult. I guess the difficult part about it is the actual production of the cake versus a pre-existing cake that they could just sell. Is that kind of one of the other arguments?
Yeah, I think that was implicit within the decision that was made, but like because they construed the artwork of the gay cake or they construed the customized gay cake as artwork, and that you can't compel somebody to do custom work for you in that manner that goes contrary to their religious beliefs specifically.
Well, I guess so, but couldn't you also discriminate against a Nazi cake?
I mean, yeah, you should be able to discriminate against a Nazi cake.
Yeah, they are, I guess.
I can't hear you, Dusty.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just saying it's a really hard decision because of all those factors.
And that's why things should be decided on the merits of the case alone, which is how things typically are decided in American courts.
My concern is with my understanding is the Supreme Court made it very clear that they were making a very narrow.
Yeah, they were making it based on the merits of the. They were making it based on the merits of the case, but
that's right. That's right. It was. They wanted it to be known that this was a very narrow ruling in this particular case, and that the slippery slope isn't something we should worry about.
No, you should never worry about a slippery slope, Ed. I think it would do good for your mental health to not worry about slippery slopes.
Well, all you have to do is get the next case that's 97% the same, different, and they use that as a precedent and so on.
Well, that's the thing, is that like you can make the same argument about Plessy v. Ferguson, which upheld segregation, and any case that came subsequently as being a slippery slope based on that decision. But Plessy v. Ferguson was overruled in Brown v. Board. So, like, slippery slopes exist.
Yeah, he did that
only to the
intentionally,
extent.
by the way.
Huh? Yeah, I know.
He did that intentionally, and because he could pass for white. And I wonder if this gay cake thing was the same kind of thing, where the Scopes monkey, that teacher, he couldn't even remember if he ever even taught evolution, but he volunteered for it.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that we all got to get along, some way, shape, or form. We all have to get along in this diverse culture that we live in. And I want that rulings that leave that impression that that's the ideal, that, look, you may disagree, whatever, they come in, the next guy who comes in, for all you know, the most hateful person in the world, you just don't know the details, but you're serving them a lunch or a dinner or whatever, and just civility, I guess, is what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, and I was going against that exact idea when, we're talking, it's contextual, Ed. Everything is contextual. You can't look at something and apply broad strokes to it when we're talking about specific instances, such as this.
Well, I don't know.
Slippery slope is a fallacy for that very reason, because but
when you're talking about rulings about the Supreme Court, they have an enormous sway, right, over the long term.
Ed, I agree with your idea about how we should all get along, of course, but historically speaking, arguments for civility are they tend to be really biased and not work out that well. And a lot of arguments for civility come from the Puritans, and specifically often from religious people too, who you don't like.
Well, we all know that Jesus loves Ed. So
civility, yes. I mean, you could trample on free speech, right? So civility is going to lose when you're talking about free speech. I mean, I understand that. All right, we have to have the ability to criticize bad ideas and so on.
Who should be civil and when? Everything's contextual, is what I'm trying to say, Ed.
Yeah.
If I don't want to be in the same restaurant as Sarah Sanders, I'm going to leave that restaurant. Is that civil? Yeah. If I'm the proprietor of a restaurant and everybody's leaving because Sarah Sanders walks in, should I kick out Sarah Sanders?
I mean, I guess the question is,
if I'm going to lose all my employees for serving Sarah Sanders, should I kick out Sarah Sanders?
Not gonna. I mean, was that the argument, that she's gonna?
It was the staff who voted. They literally
a democratic vote to see what they wanted to do about it.
Yeah, the owner of the place put it to the staff to decide whether or not they would serve.
Why does the analogy of race not run through here?
Because race is immutable. You can't change your race, Ed.
Sarah Sanders doesn't have to be White House press secretary if she wants to go to Red Hen. She could just quit and then go eat.
Yeah, you can't change your race. You could always change your idea, your ideology. That's something changeable.
You said that they took a vote. I mean, our civil rights are not granted by a vote of the people.
How is it a violation of our civil rights?
I don't know. Maybe it isn't.
I don't think it is.
Maybe it isn't. I don't know.
And making
I just feel like putting myself in that situation, it wouldn't even occur to me to do such a thing. And I fucking hate that woman's guts.
You're also not in a position to make that decision.
What's that?
You're also not in a position to make that decision.
I'm saying if I put myself in that person's shoes, I couldn't imagine doing that.
You could if you were in her shoes directly, because the situation would be different. It's contextual. Like, you're not her. So you can't judge her based on her decision just by saying you wouldn't do it.
You haven't had the same life experiences as her.
And you weren't in the restaurant to know what the atmosphere in the situation was with the staff. Because the staff are the ones who decided.
So what I'm saying, would you have done that? Could you imagine any public servant that you would do that to? Which you know is going to hit the media and become a shitstorm, whether you like it or not, right? It's going to fucking run on the news cycle. I'm just saying.
I would probably not serve Sarah Sanders. I'd be like, get out of my store.
I could see saying that if I knew it wasn't going to be in the fucking news cycle for a week.
To me, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the news cycle shouldn't dictate someone's personal actions.
Well, no, I don't know about. I mean, there's smart people who say things like, make decisions as if, the world is watching, right? In other words, that everything you do and the decisions that you make are.
So why does Sarah Sanders, as the customer, take primacy over the business owner?
She wasn't disruptive. There was no, again, there's only one reason she was asked.
By virtue of her political position, she is by nature disruptive. You can make that argument. So, just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean that it's not an argument that can be made. How do you know that?
People in there, because because he got voted in president. Right?
We're talking about a specific restaurant in a specific place in Washington, D.C. This isn't the Red Hen restaurant, isn't the rest of America. And we're not even talking about half of the people in the country voted for him. No, they didn't. A quarter of registered voters voted for him. Less than a quarter. Because about 50% of the American population went out and voted, and he got less than half of the popular vote. So saying half of America supports him is kind of fallacious.
Roughly.
Bullshit. It's not rough. Literally 25% of the population voted for him.
All right, so 1 in 4 people.
And how many of those people voted because there was a choice between him and Hillary Clinton? How many people say they support him just because they support America? Versus, it's a bad argument, Ed, is what I'm trying to say.
What's a bad argument?
Saying that
you're not allowed to eat in my restaurant because I don't like your politics.
Or just
I'm all for what?
Or just I don't like you. If it's not based on, like, this is the other thing that has negatively affected people of protected groups, is that business owners in the United States reserve the right to refuse service on almost any grounds except for these protected categories of race, of sex, of sexuality. You cannot refuse service based on those grounds, but for anything else you can.
I'm not discussing the law. I understand that. I'm discussing what I look when that broke. I was like, shameful glee. I was like, fuck her, good for her. And then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, you know, then you've got the asshole politicians on the other side saying they're going to start doing the same thing.
That's exactly how politics in this country works, because
I understand, but we don't like it. We don't like it. So why are we?
So is the fix to not do that, or is the fix to fix the system writ large? Because even if this didn't happen, there would have been something else that we would be talking about and complaining about right now, like we were doing with the goddamn shooting that happened in Annapolis. This is so like a shitty argument to have that's saying that, oh, this business owner was wrong because of a decision that she made. I'm not here to decide on the merits or morality of somebody else's decision in their own private business. That's not what I'm in the business of doing. That's like saying I'm going to judge somebody for having gay sex. It's the same thing to me. Like there's no reason to judge somebody for refusing service in this situation, I don't think. But like with the situation with the gay cake situation, it's a little bit more fuzzy than even this one. Because this one was a clear cut. She is the press secretary at the White House. I don't want to be associated with anybody who works in the White House, so I'm not going to serve her. And that is a political action. Like I could say that I'm going to boycott any like the people who want to boycott Israel. That's a political action. And it should be protected speech. There's nothing wrong with, you know, refusing service or refusing to partake in somebody's commerce based on a political belief. Political beliefs are different than religious beliefs, and they're different than other identifying statuses. And regardless of the political fervor or foment that comes after the act, you know, if you're going to make a political statement, you want people to talk about it. Just because it doesn't coalesce with what you want in politics doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's disagreeable to you. And that's a completely other topic altogether.
Yep. Disagreeable to me.
So to that extent, I'm like, I want to go to the Red Hen and give them high tips because I don't think what they did was wrong.
What kind
Just
of
like
restaurant is the Red Hen?
it's like a bar, like a hipster bar.
Well, if it's a hipster bar, that kind of makes sense that they would kick her out.
I mean, there's a ton of bars in DC.
I'm pretty sure the people who are in the know in DC know which bars not to.
I can barely hear you.
Anyway, I think when Dusty gets back to his desk, I think that we should wrap this up. Unless we have something.
I'll be back there soon, but what I was going to say, there's probably politicians in DC that know which places that they should not go to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like, it's generally frowned upon for straight people to go to gay bars. Like, and that's
like how many straight people want to go anyway? I mean, I'm sure it happens, but
have you ever been to a gay bar?
No, have you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What's it like?
They're super fun and people are nice. But you know, people complain about it, but you know, they don't really kick you out. It's just it's a societal convention.
I was on a date.
It's just like in a regular bar. If there are too many dudes at the door, they're gonna get discriminated against.
Yeah, like nightclubs, especially.
And in the opposite way, if you're a hot girl, you might be more likely to get let in that scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
I was on a date in Midtown, walking down the street with a girl, and I'm like, wow, look at that place. It was fucking really nice and packed. And surprised I wasn't familiar with it by name or reputation, and walked in, and it was, 99% men. So that's the extent of my experience on that.
Gay bars are fun. Sometimes people buy you drinks. You should go to gay bars more often, Ed.
Not interested, my friend. For two very good reasons. One, I don't drink, and two, that kind of kills the motivation entirely.
You should just learn how to party.
But I'm all for diversity.
Gay bars are fun.
I'd rather go to a lesbian bar.
Isaiah, does it give you like a tiny window into the experience of what it's like to be a hot girl at a bar?
Every now and then. Every now and then. I mean, there have been situations where I go to a gay bar and meet straight chicks, so that's fun. And like when I go to the gay bar with my sister, it's like we get fucked up and party. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Although I'm old now, so I do it much less often. Also, my sister lives in California and I live in Maryland.
Well,
So
You're old now?
yeah, I'm getting old.
aren't you like the same age as me, Isaiah? Like
No,
less than 30?
I'm much older than you. I'm like
Yeah.
90. Yeah, my body's falling apart. What else do we want to talk about before we shut this bitch down, Dusty?
Was there something else from the week?
Titties.
I have one question for the panel.
Great idea.
Quick. Now that Justice Kennedy is retiring, there's a social media shitstorm that Roe v. overturned when Trump puts in his right-wing candidate, right-wing justice. Is anybody actually fearful that could happen?
It's too soon
On a
to
scale of
tell.
1
Too soon to tell.
possible to me personally, but I mean anything could happen, but just
Too soon to
seems
tell.
impossible.
Nothing's impossible. I mean, we're talking about Supreme Courts almost the same Supreme Court who passed, Buckley v. Vallejo and Citizens United, and also ended up passing gay marriage. So who the fuck knows, man? I mean, having I don't know.
It's not like Kennedy was a liberal or anything.
Yeah.
He was picked by Reagan.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He was a mixed bag for sure. Seems like that's always
That wasn't known when he was picked. Reagan thought he had a solid conservative judge that would
Really?
vote conservative every time.
Oh.
He wasn't an intentional centrist. He happened to be one. And, he wasn't meant to be non-ideological when he was picked. So that's why I say it's too soon to tell.
Yep. Completely.
We'll have to see how the judge performs. We can't.
And we'll even have to see. We even have to see if they get one pushed through Congress as is, because it's like who knows how the election in November is going to go. So it's either gonna.
Yeah, man, the polls have not been reliable.
Yeah.
At all.
So
No.
I mean, we could have Democratic majorities in both houses that choose to impeach the president in 2019. So, and make Mike Pence a lame duck based on what Mitch McConnell did in 2016.
What would the basis even be for impeachment?
It doesn't matter.
Did you see that video that was circulating a couple of weeks back where Trump moved his water bottle to the floor, and then Pence did it immediately after him. Have you guys seen that?
No.
God, you have to see that. They're sitting at a table having a meeting, and Trump takes his water bottle and like puts it on the floor, and literally 2 seconds later, Pence does the same exact thing.
On that note,
I mean, it's the oddest thing you'll ever. It makes no sense.
On that note, I think we should encourage people to go watch that video and wrap this bitch up. What do you think?
All right. Yes, we could certainly do that. Also, watch the video of Trump rearranging his desk. He does that quite a bit. He likes to move. He likes to move other people's stuff out of the way when he sits down.
That
But
sounds
anyway,
like a riveting video.
Riveting.
well, yeah, it's just
It'll tell you all you need to know about Mike Pence.
Okay.
yeah. Said he likes
In
to
about
move
10
water
seconds.
bottles after Trump does.
What a world. What a world.
All right. Anyway. All right. We're going to go ahead and wrap up this Congress/freestyle chat. Again, my name is the woke centrist, Dusty Cubes, up in his house. Please check out our Twitter page at Mixed Mental Arts. Also, most importantly, check out Mixed Mental Arts podcast. The most recent episode was Moyo, right?
Yeah, Dambisa Moyo.
Yeah, excellent. If you love Lessig, you'd probably love that podcast as well. They have a lot of crossover in the way they deal with political issues, so certainly check that out. What plugs do you have?
Start with Andrew.
Okay. Yeah, if anyone wants to check out my podcast, it's the Mindgasms podcast on the YouTube. And I also have
Who was your last guest? You gotta
my last guest.
Make
my
sure
last-
you rep your last episode every
yes,
time
my
you do
last
a plug.
episode was with the great Eric Hunley, who has his own unstructured podcast that Isaiah is involved with.
Am I?
And you are.
Am
You
I?
do the introductory music and you do the addendum episodes.
Am I? Go.
Yeah.
Go on.
And then there's also my blog if people are interested at mindgasms.theblogpress.com. And I'm on the social medias, the Twitter at Andrew Meitzer. I have that weird German spelling of my last name, Meintzer. And then I'm also on the Facebook.
That's not a real
Bluehost.
letter.
Yeah, it is. It's a Canadian pronunciation of that letter, Z. It's actually Z. It's not Z.
It's a Z.
Yeah,
It's
no, it's Z.
Okay.
And yeah, if people want to, they should also give me money on Patreon. That would be awesome.
Don't give him money
So,
unless
yeah.
you give us money.
Yes, also give Mixed Mental Arts money.
Anyway, Ed.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. I am Sam's Bulldog at Edward M. Kennedy 2 on Twitter. Find me there. I'm also Sam's Bulldog to check out my channel. Thank you.
On the YouTube.
And Ed, before we move on, have you considered becoming your own bulldog?
Mhm.
Ed's Bulldog.
Well, not all that seriously, but we don't want to get into that now.
Aw.
You're religious about Sam Harris in the same way that Hayden Bruce is still religious about Christianity. Both of you, people want both of you to drop those labels, right?
Yeah, sometimes people need their Jesus figure.
Yep.
The reason I would consider dropping it is I don't really need an avenue to talk about science and philosophy, which they don't do as much anymore. It's more about the bullshit of the day, which is what's been bothering me.
Yeah, I try to keep my hate reading down as much as possible.
Probably a good policy.
Anyway, is it my turn, Dustin?
It is.
I'm Isaiah. I play music. My band's Great Ghouls. Search me on Bandcamp. Search me on Google Play. I have music available for sale there. Give Mixed Mental Arts money on Patreon. Go to our website and read the articles that we've written there. Some of them are actually really interesting. Some of them are also very controversial and thought-provoking. So if you have time, read our stuff. It's fun. What else? I like pie. If you ever see me, please buy me pie.
I got a pie yesterday, Isaiah. I'll mail it to you. It might not be good anymore, though.
Not worth it. And Dustin, Dustin, roll us out.
Yeah, to finish everything up, make sure you check out our website, mixedmentalarts.online. We do have an affiliate link, so at no cost to you, you can help us out by shopping on Amazon. So go ahead, scroll down to the very bottom, bookmark that link, shop at Amazon, and help out Mixed Mental Arts. My personal Twitter at Wokecentrist. I crack a joke every now and then. If you see those jokes, like and retweet them, even if they're corny. That helps me out quite a bit. We also have our Instagram. Check that out as well. We also have our Patreon. So if you want to get early access to our podcast, sign up. You know, even the lowest tier helps us out quite a bit. And for next week, I believe we're doing the MMA Christian chat, but I might be wrong. I'll keep you guys updated.
What are you doing? What are we doing?
Didn't I see that you posted that it was going to happen tomorrow?
Was it tomorrow? I thought it was. I thought it was next week.
The Pragmatic Christian MMA chat.
It's next.
Yeah, it's next Sunday. That's next Sunday.
Okay.
So if you guys want to tune in into a Pragmatic Christian session, I will be there to handle everything.
I'll be there. Your friend Hayden will be there, Ed.
Wait, I don't understand. Is it an MMA chat or is it the Pragmatic Christian podcast?
It's an MMA chat about Christianity, but Hayden is mostly going to direct most things. I'm going to be
cool.
I'm going to be there to
and when is that?
ask questions. That's going to be on Sunday.
Tomorrow, Sunday, or a week?
Next Sunday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so go ahead, check that out. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Share these videos on Facebook and all your social media hotspots. And thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.